What if everything you've been told about space missions was a lie? No moon, no deep space, just a studio. Sounds shocking, right? But thousands of people online are claiming exactly that about NASA's Artemis missions, especially Artemis II. So today, we're not guessing, we're not assuming. We're breaking it down with actual evidence. By the end of this video, you'll know the truth, and it might not be what you expect. Now, the same claim is being made about modern Artemis missions. But today, we're not guessing. We're going deeper than videos. We're going into evidence that cannot be faked, and in this video, you'll understand one thing clearly. Faking the moon missions would actually be harder than going to the moon, because the Artemis program is not a single production controlled by one entity. It is a global effort led by NASA, but deeply integrated with ESA, JAXA, and CSA, each contributing hardware, software, and mission-critical systems. If this were fake, it wouldn't just be one organization lying, it would require multiple governments, thousands of scientists, engineers, and private contractors across different countries to maintain the same lie without a single verified leak, which historically has never happened at this scale. Then comes launch day, where theory meets reality. The Space Launch System ignites with a force so immense, it produces over 8.8 million pounds of thrust, creating shock waves, sound levels, and heat signatures that are not just visible but measurable by independent instruments worldwide. This isn't something you can fake with CGI, because radar systems, infrared sensors, and independent satellite tracking all confirm the rocket's ascent in real time. As the rocket leaves Earth, the Orion spacecraft begins its journey. And this is where things move beyond visuals into physics. The spacecraft transmits radio signals back to Earth, and these signals don't arrive instantly, they are delayed. That delay matches the exact distance the spacecraft has traveled, calculated using the speed of light. Anyone with the right equipment can measure this delay independently, meaning the mission's position in space is not just claimed, it's verified. As Orion moves farther, it passes through the Van Allen radiation belts, where onboard sensors record radiation levels that align precisely with decades of scientific predictions. If this were filmed in a studio, they wouldn't just need realistic visuals, they would need to replicate invisible radiation patterns that match real-world physics perfectly. Then there's the question of microgravity. Skeptics often say it's done with wires or underwater filming, but real microgravity behaves differently. Objects don't just float, they drift, rotate, and respond to the smallest forces in ways that match the equations of orbital mechanics. These are not visual tricks. They are consistent physical behaviors that would be incredibly difficult to fake across hours of continuous footage. And while all this is happening, the mission is being tracked by the Deep Space Network, a global system of massive antennas spread across continents, measuring signal timing, direction, and strength. These measurements are not hidden. They are accessible, verifiable, and consistent with the spacecraft's expected trajectory. If Artemis were fake, it wouldn't just be about fooling viewers. It would require fooling physics itself. Now imagine you're still not convinced. You decide to question everything, to treat this like an investigation rather than a belief. You look at the footage and say, this could still be staged. But then you realize the mission isn't just footage, it's data. Continuous streams of telemetry are released, including speed, trajectory, fuel consumption, and system status. And these numbers are not random. They match predictive models used in aerospace engineering, and independent researchers and universities analyze them regularly. If the data were fake, inconsistencies would appear quickly under scrutiny, but they don't. Then you consider the idea that it would be easier to fake it than to actually go to space. At first that sounds logical until you break it down. To fake Artemis, you would still need to build a real rocket capable of producing measurable thrust, simulate real-time telemetry that matches physics equations, coordinate signals that can be independently tracked, and involve private companies like SpaceX and Lockheed Martin without a single credible whistleblower. At that point, the complexity of faking the mission exceeds the complexity of executing it. Then comes another claim. Why don't we see stars in space footage? The answer lies in how cameras work. When exposure is set for bright objects like Earth or spacecraft surfaces, faint stars become invisible, just like they do in daytime photography on Earth. This isn't suspicious, it's expected. Another claim says, the Earth looks fake from space. But satellite weather data taken at the same time matches cloud patterns seen in spacecraft images exactly, meaning the visuals are consistent with independent observations. Then there's the argument about communication. Skeptics suggest signals could be generated from Earth, but signal delay and Doppler shift measurements prove otherwise. As the spacecraft moves, the frequency of its signal changes in a way that matches its velocity relative to Earth, something that can't be convincingly faked without physically moving the source. Amateur radio operators around the world track these signals independently, confirming their origin in deep space. Then comes the idea that no one else verifies the mission. In reality, space is one of the most monitored domains on Earth. Multiple countries track objects in orbit and beyond, not out of curiosity, but for security reasons. If Artemis were fake, rival nations would have every incentive to expose it, yet they don't. Instead, they confirm its trajectory and presence. If the mission were staged, these satellites wouldn't function as expected. Then there's re-entry, one of the most physically demanding phases. As Orion returns to Earth, it enters the atmosphere at extreme speeds, generating a plasma sheath that temporarily blocks radio signals. This communication blackout is a known physical effect, and its timing matches predictions precisely. The heat shield endures temperatures of thousands of degrees, and the capsule's descent is tracked by radar and visual observation before it splashes down in the ocean, where recovery teams retrieve it in operations witnessed and recorded by multiple independent sources. At every step, the mission leaves behind evidence not just visual, but measurable, testable, and repeatable. And the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to support the idea of a staged production, because the level of coordination required to fake all of this without error would be unprecedented in human history. But this isn't the first time such doubts have appeared. Decades before Artemis, another mission faced the same accusations. The Apollo 11 moon landing became one of the most questioned achievements in history, not because of lack of evidence, but because of how extraordinary it was. People pointed at the flag and said it was waving, not realizing that in a vacuum, motion continues longer due to the absence of air resistance, and the movement was caused by the astronaut adjusting the pole. They pointed at the sky and asked why there were no stars, not understanding camera exposure settings. They questioned shadows, ignoring the effects of uneven terrain and perspective. They doubted footprints, unaware that lunar dust has unique properties that allow it to hold shape without moisture. They raised concerns about radiation, not knowing that the missions passed quickly through the Van Allen radiation belts, minimizing exposure to safe levels. But beyond explanations, Apollo left behind something undeniable physical evidence. Retroreflectors placed on the moon still reflect laser beams sent from Earth, allowing precise measurement of the distance between Earth and the moon. These experiments are conducted by observatories worldwide, not controlled by any single organization. Moon rocks brought back during the missions have been studied across the globe, and their composition differs significantly from Earth rocks, matching what scientists expect from lunar material. Thousands of people were involved in Apollo, and over the decades, no credible evidence has emerged to support the idea of a coordinated deception. Now, as Artemis prepares to take humans back to the moon, the same pattern repeats: doubt, speculation, and conspiracy. But this time, the evidence is even stronger because technology has advanced, transparency has increased, and independent verification is easier than ever. So the question is no longer whether these missions are real. The question is what it would actually take to fake them. Not just convincing visuals, but perfectly consistent physics, globally synchronized data. Independent verification across nations, and absolute silence from thousands of participants for decades. That level of deception would be more extraordinary than the missions themselves. And when you weigh both possibilities, one becomes far more reasonable than the other. These missions are not illusions. They are the result of human engineering, scientific understanding, and decades of progress. So, what do you think? Comment your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing content.